All right, so it looks like the Vatican has now officially warned the SSPX that if they go through with consecrations next month, they will be excommunicated and the SSPX will be in schism, and anyone who formally adheres to it will be in schism. I want to cover this warning that the Vatican has issued. I'm going to read it to you. It's from Cardinal Fernandez, posted on the Vatican website, and it's actually very similar to the situation that took place with the 88 consecrations and the SSPX back then. Now, maybe you've taken my course on the history of the SSPX. It's at rtcourses.com. If you haven't, maybe go and check it out. But as a quick reminder for maybe those who haven't looked at this in a while or haven't seen that course, Lefebvre, the founder of the SSPX, ultimately in 1988 decided to go through with consecrations of 4 bishops without papal mandate. And according to the Code of Canon Law, a bishop has to have papal approval, a papal mandate in order to go through with consecrations. Otherwise, they're automatically excommunicated and thus in schism. Anyone who does the consecration and anyone who is consecrated. And what took place prior to the consecrations in 1988 was Pope John Paul II formally warned Lefebvre that if he goes through with these consecrations, he'll be excommunicated. He received the warning, acknowledged receipt of the warning, but despite that, still proceeded to go through with it for quite a number of reasons that, again, I cover in more detail at the course, rtcourses.com. But long story short, he just felt that it was absolutely necessary. He felt that Rome wasn't preserving the faith, and unless he goes through with these consecrations, the Catholic Church will fall apart. There will be no Catholicism. So it was on him to perpetuate and continue Catholicism. So he felt the weight of the entire Catholic history, the entire Catholic community on his shoulders and said, I have to do this out of necessity. You know, the Vatican obviously disagreed and said this wasn't necessary. The Vatican claimed that, the Pope is the successor of the Apostle Peter and therefore is the guarantor of the tradition and of the faith. And, the church won't fail because of the papacy. And so the Pope warned him and said, no, you can't do this. He went ahead and went through with consecrations, and thus he and the 4 men who were consecrated were excommunicated. Later on, Pope Benedict, as a gesture of good faith, lifted the excommunication of the 4 men that Lefebvre had consecrated. And, there was a lot of hope that maybe they would be reintegrated fully back into full communion with the church. It just simply never happened for quite a few reasons. Ultimately, Rome wanted the SSPX to accept Vatican II, and the SSPX said, this is a non-negotiable. We cannot accept Vatican II because it contains some teachings in them that are, in their estimation, heretical or at the very least erroneous, just depending on who you're talking to. And they felt that it would be too much of a compromise to accept Vatican II, so they can't do it. And so that was a deal breaker. Rome said, you have to do it. SSPX said, we can't do it. And that was pretty much the end of the negotiations and really any attempt to reintegrate the SSPX back in. And, the dialogue kind of went cold after that, after Cardinal Mueller told him, look, these are the essentials. And so the SSPX finds itself in a similar situation where they still maintain that it's necessary for them to continue the Catholic faith because Rome isn't doing it. The Catholic bishops aren't doing it. And they only have a few bishops left at this point. And so in order to preserve the faith and continue Catholicism, they feel it's on them to perpetuate the tradition and the communion. And so they're going through with consecrations. And thus, once again, Rome is sending them a warning in advance saying, don't do this. If you do it, it will be a schismatic act and you guys will be excommunicated. So back to 1988 is where it looks like things are going. So just in, Cardinal Fernandez, prefect of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, issued a statement, again on the Vatican website, reiterating that if the SSPX continues with July 1st consecrations of these bishops, it will be a schismatic act, and thus the consecrators and the men consecrated will be excommunicated, and anyone who adheres to the SSPX would also be in schism and excommunicated. So it has consequences on the followers of the SSPX as well. So here's the full statement. With regard to the priestly fraternity of St. Pius X, the SSPX, what has already been communicated is hereby reaffirmed. The episcopal ordinations announced by the priestly fraternity of St. Pius X do not have the requisite pontifical mandate. This act will constitute, quote, a schismatic act. And they're referencing John Paul II, who said that the SSPX was in schism after the 88 consecrations. And, quote, formal adherence to the schism constitutes a grave offense against God and entails the excommunication established by the law of the church. And that's a reference to the 1996 Pontifical Council for Legislative Texts. So anybody who adheres to formally the SSPX would also be in schism and therefore excommunicated. So priests who would adhere to it, any kind of attendees who formally adhere to it, they would also be excommunicated according to the Vatican. And it continues, the Holy Father, Pope Leo XIV, continues in his prayers to ask the Holy Spirit to enlighten the leaders of the SSPX so that they may retrace their steps regarding the most grave decision that they have taken. From the Vatican, May 13th, 2026. Now, the SSPX has requested multiple times to meet with Pope Leo XIV, who has refused to meet with him. Now, he has met with all sorts of people from all sorts of perspectives, many that contradict and conflict with the Catholic tradition and Catholic faith. For some reason, however, he doesn't want to meet with SSPX. And so the way a lot of people perceive this is that Pope Leo is less open to the SSPX than his predecessor, Pope Francis, because you'll recall Pope Francis was actually a little bit more open to them. He effectively said that their marriages under certain conditions will be valid, their confessions can be valid, and so he kind of opened the door to the SSPX a little bit more. But now it looks like his successor is less hesitant to do so and won't even meet with the SSPX, it appears. However, he has sent this warning, and I suspect that a lot of people are just going to point out, well, look, this situation with the SSPX, whatever you may think about it, whether the SSPX is right or wrong, whatever you think about it, whatever perspective you have, I think a lot of people are going to say it's odd that the SSPX gets these formal canonical warnings and threats of excommunication, but the German bishops do not. Now, the German bishops are outright calling for gay marriage, women's ordination, all sorts of heresies, you name it. There has not been a formal canonical warning of any kind of sort equivalent to this with the SSPX. None of them have been excommunicated. The German bishops have not been labeled schismatic, even though, again, they're operating with a schismatic mentality and affirming heresy. So, again, regardless of what you think of the SSPX, good, bad, great, horrible, somewhere in between, I think most people are going to come away with this thinking that there's a very selective discipline in the church, that anybody who is more traditional, resembles tradition, gets targeted more than someone who's more liberal and less conservative. And you know what? There does appear to be a double standard here. Some people will say, well, look, two wrongs don't make a right. That doesn't justify the SSPX. Well, look, I get it. I understand that. I think, however, the issue is going to be the way in which it's perceived by most people. This kind of selective discipline that we've seen for a very long time, perhaps decades now. And it's not a good look. It ultimately looks really bad, and it looks like the focus is on disciplining anybody who wants to resemble something that looks preconciliar, that looks more what they would estimate to be traditional, and less concern about people who are promoting really progressive, more modernist views and perspectives. And it's not a good look because it doesn't put ultimately the truth in the forefront. It rather puts biases in the forefront. And that's concerning. So I suspect that's the way most people are going to perceive this. Now, as to the SSPX, is this going to deter them, this canonical warning? No, I mean, they already knew it was coming. And they're going to proceed with it. What does this ultimately mean? Well, it ultimately means, from the Vatican's perspective, they'll be in schism. From the SSPX's perspective, they're not in schism. You know, the SSPX didn't believe that they were in schism in 1988. They did not believe that the excommunication of John Paul II of Lefebvre was legit or valid. So from the SSPX perspective, nothing's really going to change. They're going to still say that they're in a state of emergency and therefore these judgments don't apply. Rome is going to say, yes, they do. You're excommunicated and you're in schism, and anyone who formally adheres to your movement is also in schism. So again, back to 1988. And ultimately, you have two positions here that appear to be irreconcilable. And what this will likely mean moving forward is further separation between these two communities on a more permanent level. Before, there was some hope of reintegration, and there were a few signs of it as well. But those have just been napalmed with these acts, right? And so I think what we're going to see moving forward is these two communities are going to grow further and further away. And any chance or opportunity of reintegration, reconciliation, full communion are going to be less and less and less likely and possible moving forward. Anyways, those are my thoughts on the matter. I wanted to share them with you. Make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll keep you up to date on this and much more. We'll see you later.